If you're watching this video and you are pro-choice, there's a lot of noise in the culture. There's a lot of noise on social media. I'm in the thick of it. I'm hearing it every day. I'm seeing it. I'm seeing reactions from people on all sides of the spectrum because my social media circles and friends list contain a wide array of views and opinions and voices on all kinds of subjects. Now, that's a good thing. Echo chambers are the worst. All I want to do is speak to my friends who are pro-choice and to let you know how not to talk to people that are pro-life if you want to persuade them. Here are slogans, talking points, arguments that get repeated over and over and over that people who oppose abortion are not in the least bit moved by. And I'm sharing this so that you will better understand the people with whom you disagree. Those of us who oppose abortion. Firstly, we're not all Republicans. I'm not a Republican. I usually don't vote Republican, honestly. So the idea that this is a partisan issue is simply false. It's not a partisan issue. I'm going to link to numerous groups in this video description that oppose elective abortion, none of which are Republican affiliated, none of which are conservative. It's simply not true. So if you're having a discussion about abortion and you start railing against the GOP, great. I will probably agree with much of your critique of them. And so will a lot of people who oppose abortion, because that's not the issue that's being discussed. Second point is, I am a Christian, but abortion is not a religious issue. This is another common talking point that's simply not true. Again, see the groups that I've linked in the description below. Abortion is a human rights issue for us. So while I am a Christian, and while many Christians have used their faith to drive their human rights struggles, think of Martin Luther King Jr., think of William Wilberforce, think of Mahatma Gandhi, people have used their faith to guide their lives. But abortion transcends any one religious view. Some of the sharpest critiques of elective abortion come from the group Secular Pro-Life. If you are not familiar with them, I encourage you to be, because they put out some really good stuff. And Secular Pro-Life and I would disagree on a whole range of issues. But what we do agree on is that taking the life of an innocent human for elective reasons is unethical. It's a human rights violation. So if you go into an abortion argument with talking points about how bad the GOP is, or how people need to separate church and state, or any of those things, you're just going to be talking past a lot of us, and nobody will benefit from it. Also, if you use the term anti-choice, that's rhetorically smooth on the part of the abortion industry, but it's just not true. For instance, I'm not a Republican. I usually vote independent, libertarian. I'll be the first person to say I want everybody to have as many choices as they possibly can, free from government interference, unless that choice involves committing aggression against another person. Then it's not a question of choice any longer. See, if abortion were just like getting a mole removed, if abortion were just like deciding to get a vasectomy, if abortion was just like choosing a tattoo, by all means, government should have no business telling you whether you can or can't do any of that stuff that only involve you and your body. But here's the key, friends who are pro-choice. For those of us who do not share your opinion of abortion, it's not an issue of choice because another body is involved. Once another human life enters the equation, choice always takes a back seat to that. So calling somebody who opposes elective abortion anti-choice is like calling somebody who opposes child molesting anti-choice, because they oppose people having the right to choose to use their body to harm a child. That's what we see abortion as doing. You have to understand this, or you will never gain any headway with any of us. You'll score points from your own echo chamber. You'll raise money for your base if it's a fundraiser. You'll rile people up to your side, but you aren't going to change any minds by using this type of terminology. And this applies to those of us on the pro-life side as well. We have to understand the difference between being pro-choice and being pro-abortion. Even if we don't agree with that distinction, which I don't. I think it's like saying somebody who doesn't favor abolition is not pro-slavery, they're just anti-abolition. I think it breaks down at the end of the day. However, I know that for a lot of people who consider themselves pro-choice, they do so because, one, they think it involves a woman and her body and the government telling a woman what she should be able to do with her body, and two, another human life is not in the equation. So they look at it, my pro-choice friends, as this is solely about women's rights and has nothing to do with protecting children. And I try to make a a distinction in talking to people like that. Now, of course, I want to persuade them that they're wrong. I want to persuade them that to not oppose electively killing unwanted babies is to be ultimately on the side of those who do want to electively kill unwanted babies. And I'm using the word babies in the popular colloquial sense, just like when a pregnant woman says, "Ooh, I felt the baby kick," or a child comes up and says, "Mommy, can I feel the baby in your tummy?" I'm using it in that sense. If you want to be precise and call it a fetus because that puts it at a little bit more arm's length from humanizing the issue, you can do that, but I think that's unethical. Because abortion, ultimately, at the end of the day, is a question about dehumanization. See, for those of us who are pro-life, that's what it boils down to. It's not about religion. It has nothing to do with controlling women's bodies. I don't know of any other legislation, there may be, and I may be unaware of it, that attempts to control a woman's body. I mean, there may be. There's always crazy laws being put forth and voted on, so I don't think it's impossible, but I'm just not aware of it. The only control that those of us who oppose elective abortion want is the same control that prevents somebody from endangering a child, the same level of control that prevents a parent of a newborn from neglecting the child, from refusing to feed the child because they don't want to use their bodily resources to keep a parasite alive. I mean, you could consider a newborn extremely parasitic in that way. They can't do anything on their own. Leave a baby on its own for any length of time and see how people respond to that choice. This is what you have to understand, friends who are pro-choice. All of the arguments that you make are weighed under, would those arguments apply if we were talking about an infant? So ask yourself, when you're talking to somebody who opposes elective abortion, and I'm being careful with my terminology because even most staunch advocates of the pro-life position realize that there are tragic times when abortion may be the least tragic option. There are such times. All laws against taking innocent human life recognize that there are exceptions, such as if other human lives are in danger. So if you're going to discuss the issue of abortion with someone who opposes elective abortion, don't jump to the exception cases. Don't start asking about rape or the life of the mother being in danger or incest or ectopic pregnancies or any of things like that, because 99% of pro-life people I know would say, okay, yes, we can talk about exceptions and let's have that discussion. But first, let's make sure that the 95% of abortions that are happening for purely elective reasons are off the table. Once we can agree that that is wrong and that a society that upholds human rights for every member, including the weakest of all in society, once we agree that that is off the table, then we can absolutely talk about needed exceptions and extreme emergencies. So if you want to convince someone who's pro-life that you're serious about genuinely protecting the weakest of society, if you're serious about human rights, if you have a consistent life ethic, that's the way to go. Recognize where we're coming from first and foremost, and let's try to find as much common ground as we can before we tackle the places where we differ. Now, this will not persuade those who are the shout your abortion crowd, the abortion with no exceptions and no apologies, all of those hashtag movements that trend in Hollywood and get championed by various talking heads on the far left. Nothing's going to change that. And I have no illusions that this video is not going to get attacked, ridiculed, mocked by anyone on that side of the fence. So I'm not really talking to those people. I'm talking to those of you who are pro-choice, who consider yourself reasonable, who don't consider yourself extremist, and who actually do care about human beings at every stage of life. You just are not convinced on the issue of, are they humans if they're inside their mother's womb? That's the discussion that we need to be having. It all boils down to that. Phrases like, if you don't like abortion, don't have one, doesn't do anything. Because in our ears, what we hear is, if you don't like pedophilia, don't molest a child. See, it doesn't work that way. Why? Well, because pedophilia is imminently harming, destructive to an innocent child. Well, do you understand now? That's what it is for those of us who oppose elective abortion, who see human beings as human beings from the earliest stages of life, growing naturally in their mother's womb. If left unmolested, they will continue through the normal stages of life, and they will continue into the other stages of infancy, adolescence, adulthood. Run any argument that you're about to drop on a pro-life friend through that filter. Ask yourself, would this argument have the same weight if we were talking about a toddler? If it would, then use that argument. I don't know very many that would, except for a life being in danger. But I just want you to have some insight. When you say, but I knew someone whose life would have been ruined by a pregnancy, and because of her abortion, now she's achieved this, and this. I get it, and I understand. But just know that for those who see people as people in the womb, what you're saying is no different than saying this mother who just had a child and realized she couldn't feed it and it was destroying her life opportunities. She paid someone to smother it painlessly in its sleep. And so now she is able to pursue her career and her job, and her life is so much better. And the kids that she does have now, she's able to love better because she had someone smother her unwanted newborn. That's how it sounds to us. You don't have to agree with it. I know some of you viewing this are probably raging. How dare I, a man, a white man, a cis-het white man, have an opinion on abortion? Well, remember this. We are in a period where gender and sexuality have been decoupled from societal norms. So to all of a sudden evoke gender roles and expectations and saying, because you have this set of genitalia, you cannot have an opinion on this human rights issue, it doesn't follow. It's like me saying, well, if you're a woman, you shouldn't have an opinion on rape. You would say, well, of course I should, because one, rape is a human rights issue, and two, women are victims of rape. And you're exactly right. Just as little boys are victims of abortion. So your gender, your sexuality has no bearing when it comes to a human rights issue. I don't have to have a uterus to know that killing an innocent person for elective rather than medically necessary reasons is unethical and something that I will oppose until the day I die. That is a gender neutral position. Are there things about pregnancy and about childbirth and childcare that men don't understand? Yeah, absolutely. And that's why when it comes to abortion, honestly, the voices that I listen to the loudest are those of pro-life women. Pro-life women, which is roughly half the population, if you allow for nuances on the question of abortion, if you say, okay, abortion should be heavily regulated or limited at least to the first trimester or anything like that, once you parse out the different positions, there's not a huge discrepancy between men and women. You can look at a Pew poll that says, well, 60% of women and 40% of men or something like that. But look at what the question that poll is asking. And you'll see it's usually a dichotomous, I oppose all abortions, or I think all abortions are fine. When you parse out the positions, things get a little more interesting. And one of the interesting things is there's not a huge discrepancy between the views of men and women on abortion. So if you want to persuade somebody who's pro-life, you can't tell them that they don't get to have an opinion because of their chromosomes. That wouldn't fly in any other human rights discussion. So let's not go there when it comes to abortion. Again, see the description below. I am going to link you to groups, none of which are conservative, none of which are Christian, most of which are run by women, people of color, or LGBTQ advocates. Those are the voices in the abortion debate that I put the most weight on, and that unfortunately pop culture and the media gives zero attention to. So if you're getting frustrated, if you're scared, if you're angry, if you're upset, if you're worried, if you're hearing gloom and doom, what if Roe gets overturned? What if Roe gets overturned? Well, if Roe gets overturned, all that means is that smaller groups of government officials will determine which human lives are protected and which aren't. That's all it means. So will some states outlaw abortion? Yeah. Will other states go the opposite direction and enshrine abortion? Yeah. Will this end the abortion issue? No. Not at all. And if you're pro-life, temper your celebration of Roe getting overturned. Yeah, we have struggled for 50 years for this to happen, but never with this being the end result, at least for those who are genuinely pro-life. It was the beginning, because the arguments that advocates for abortion rights offer about children needing help once they're born, about families needing support once the children are born, about there needing to be systems in place so that these children who are protected when they're in the womb are also cared for once they're out of the womb. You need to feel the weight of those arguments, pro-life friends. Now, pro-choice friends, you need to know that most of us are already doing more on those issues than most of you. Most hospitals, most pregnancy centers, most adoption and foster agencies are either run by, founded by, or heavily staffed by people who are pro-life. I know this from my own anecdotal experience, and I believe the stats would bear it out across the country. We are doing those things that we constantly get told you're not doing. But asking someone who's pro-life, well, how many unwanted babies have you adopted, is like asking someone who cares about the problem of homelessness, well, how many homeless people have you taken into your house? Do you see the disconnect? It's a disingenuous question. It's meant to belittle the person making the argument or to shut down discussion, not to advance discussion. It's meant to imply that someone is is a hypocrite if they don't oppose something in a specific way, not even realizing that it's much more effective to partner with and support those organizations that are doing those things, that are working with young women facing crisis pregnancy situations. It's much more effective to be doing that than to go out and randomly try to find one unwanted baby that you can take in and raise just so the next time somebody says, well, how many are you taking? You can say, oh, well, actually, I took one in. That's not going to change anybody's mind. And that's not how fighting structural institutional evils works. You have to work at it on a structural institutional level. So pro-life friends, this is our moment in history more than any other in the last half century to step up, put our money where our mouth is. Every post you make on social media, is there tangible support matching that post that you've given to some organization that helps to alleviate the suffering of people facing crisis pregnancies? Pro-choice friends, have you talked to your pro-life friends who are actively involved in those organizations to tangibly use their own money and their own time and their own resources to help families facing this issue? If you haven't, I really encourage you to. Not online, not in a thread on Facebook or Twitter where everybody's trying to one-up each other rhetorically, but in genuine conversation. Because what you're going to find when it comes to abortion, pro-choice advocates, many of them love women and children. They aren't standing at maternity wards scowling, wishing that those babies had been aborted. The issue is they don't see a baby as a baby until it comes out of the mother. Then in their eyes it becomes a baby. Some for religious reasons, some for philosophical reasons, some for pragmatic reasons. And while we can vehemently disagree with their conclusions, we need to recognize that it's still a person that we're disagreeing with, and that they're probably not the evil, nefarious villain that our echo chamber would make them out to be. Doesn't mean they're not wrong, but it does mean that we have to do our best to find common ground to begin the discussion from there. So pro-choice friends, maybe do the same thing to us. This is Disciple Dojo. We review and share resources all the time. So whether you're pro-choice or pro-life, I'm going to share 2 resources that if you're pro-life, I highly recommend, because they will help you understand the fuller aspects of what it is that you're supporting. And if you're pro-choice, I recommend them because they will give you a glimpse into how our minds work. I read this one 30 years ago, and to this day, I think it's still incredibly impactful. It's Francis Beckwith's book, Politically Correct Death. He goes through and presents the arguments that pro-choice advocates have used since the time of Roe versus Wade, and then gives responses to those arguments from the pro-life perspective. Similarly, Randy Alcorn has also written a book, Pro-Life Answers to Pro-Choice Arguments, and it's exactly what it says. Both of these respond to and engage with almost every pro-choice argument that's been put forth in the past 50 years. I'll put a link to each in the description below as well. Regardless of what happens this summer with the Supreme Court, regardless of what happens to Roe versus Wade, regardless of what happens to individual states and what they choose on abortion, it's important to realize what this argument is actually about. And when we try to make it about religion, when we try to make it about controlling other people's bodies or anything like that, we already are talking past each other. At the end of the day, abortion centers on one question and one question only. Are human beings when they're still in the womb? Everything else is secondary to that question. That's the question we decide first. Once we've decided that, then we can parse out the exceptions, just like we do with any other laws that involve the taking of innocent life. So if you're going to have a discussion with someone who opposes abortion, ask them a little bit more what they oppose and why. Dig deeper. Same thing for you pro-lifers out there. When you're going to talk to somebody and they're holding up their "my body, my choice" sign or spouting out whatever popular pro-choice talking point of the day is circulating on Twitter, ask them specific questions. Drill down deeper. Find out where they draw the line and what drives their position. Guys, we won't agree, but we can at least try to understand. And that's the purpose of this video. So hopefully it's given you at least a glimpse into how we who oppose elective abortion approach the issue and why.